Hello, my name is Rickard, and in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create this composite using Photoshop. If you've used Adobe Photoshop Beta Generative Fill or Adobe Firefly, you've probably noticed that it's good at doing some things and not so great at other things. Now, I've noticed that it is really good at creating landscapes, whether those are alien landscapes or real landscapes, but it does struggle with people, animals, and also uh, perfect circles and things like that. So what we're going to do in this tutorial is we're going to have Generative Fill create a landscape for us, and then we're going to use some custom brushes and overlays to turn that into a composite. Now, in order to download the brushes that I use in this tutorial, I have included those in a link in the description of this video. You are going to need them to finish the composite, so go ahead, download those, install them, and then let's dive into Photoshop Beta. Okay, so make sure you have the Photoshop Beta open, not the latest version of Photoshop, but the Photoshop Beta, which has the Generative Fill tool. So we're going to go to New File, and then we can go to Photo, and we'll select this default Photoshop size, and then hit Create. Then I'm going to select all with Command A, and then down here in Generative Fill, I'm going to put in my prompt. Now, this is a prompt that I tested in Firefly and got good results with. The results that I get in Generative Fill aren't quite as good, but they do seem to be getting better. So we're going to stick with this prompt, but you can also adjust it as you see fit. So we're going to write in a tall, glowing portal in the middle of a man-made monolith in a vast alien canyon surrounded by majestic mountains, small stony puddles in the foreground, high detail, dusk, center composition. And I'll include this in the description as well. Let's hit generate. Okay, so here are our three results. I kind of like this one. We could have our character kind of standing on this right here. I think that might look pretty cool, but let's go ahead and click generate one more time, see if we get a result that we're happier with. And I think I still like this one best, so I'm going to stick with this one. Let's go ahead and add a new layer, and we'll call this one Model. And here I'm going to go to my brush tool, right mouse click to bring up my brushes, and then click on this gear icon and go to Import Brushes. Now, this seems to be a bug in Photoshop Beta. This dialog window pops up behind your brush presets instead of in front. So you may just have to move it to the side in order to navigate. You want to go to the Assets folder, and in it you're going to see these Nucly sample brushes. If you have my silhouette brushes, you'll already have these. Okay, so in here, if we open our folder, you're going to see we have two bird flock silhouettes, a person silhouette, and a moon brush. For this, I want to select the solitary people brush. I'm going to make it smaller to about the size that I want our person. We're going to make him kind of about that big. All right, then I'm going to zoom in here, and basically I want to select the color of my black. And for that, we're going to look for the blackest element that's in the same three-dimensional level that we want to put our character. So I would say it's probably this color here. There's not a lot of it, so I'm going to go to my eyedropper tool, make sure it's on point sample, and then select this darkest point here. And if you look at our color over here, or just double click on the color, you'll notice how far away it is from a pure black. And that is appropriate for where we are putting our character because there's going to be a certain amount of atmosphere on top of him. So we're going to put him right in the center of this, like so. And then we want to add some glow wrapping around him, and we also want to add a reflection in the water here. So first, let's go ahead and add the reflection. To do that, I'm going to make a copy of our model. I'll just drag it to the new layer icon. That'll make a copy. And then I'm going to do transform, which is Command T. You can also click on this little icon in the taskbar. That will also bring up your transform. Here, I want to flip it horizontal. In the previous versions of Photoshop, you would right mouse click and go down to flip vertical, but you can actually do that with this little icon here. Now you'll notice it flipped in the center. I'm going to undo that with Command Z and first move my anchor point to the bottom. Now you can do that up here by clicking right there, or you can do it by just hovering over the anchor point and moving it to where you want. Now, if you don't see the anchor point, it's because this little checkbox is turned off. So just make sure you turn that on, and then let's move that to the bottom and then do the flip. So there you go. You can see that is now better positioned. And what we want to do is put this only in the water, not in these other elements. So to do that, I can grab my quick selection tool, select our generative fill layer, and just do a quick selection over this rock here. And then if we select our model, hold down Option, and then click on the mask, it'll wipe it out from our selection. We do have this little bit right here. So with my mask still selected, I'm going to go into my regular brush tool, just select a general brush here, reduce the size of it, which I'm doing by just holding down Control and Option and dragging left and right, and you can control the feather by dragging up and down. I'm going to make my brush smaller and just paint out right there. So that looks pretty good. Where his foot is here meeting the ground, there shouldn't be a space between. So I'm going to unlock my mask by clicking the little link. This will make sure that when I move my subject, where it's blocked off, not showing, won't move as well. So there you go. And then I want to take the opacity of this down just a little bit. So I'm going to go to my opacity and reduce this to maybe around 80%. And then finally, I want to just take a new layer. I already have the silhouette color, so I'm just going to paint right here where his feet meet the ground. Just make that element a little bit stronger there, so something like that. Okay, now to create the glow wrapping around him, I'm going to select my model layer here, go down to the layer styles and do inner glow. And I'm going to move this just to the side here so we can see our subject. And first here, what I want to do is I want to change the color to the color of our background here. So I'm just going to do that by clicking into our background and then hit OK. And you'll notice we can only do one inner glow, whereas some of these other ones you can add multiple iterations. So for the inner glow, we'll just leave this one, but I am going to add an inner shadow as well. So let's turn that on. By default, it's set to multiply. We're going to change this to screen, change our color here also to this background color. And then you can turn off the use global light and set this to 90. Then we're going to take our size down to 0 and just adjust our distance here so that the light is coming just on top of his head and wrapping a little bit around his shoulders. Right about there. And then we'll just add a little bit of size to it, maybe 4 pixels. So something like this. So now we have light nicely wrapping around him. However, it's a little strong. So what we're going to do is add a mask. Now, if we added a mask directly and started painting over it, we would lose our model. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take our model layer, make a copy of it. And on the bottom model, I'm going to get rid of these effects. And then I'm going to double click on the effects here. And what I want to do is I want to take the layer mask hides effects little thing here and turn that on. And then I want to take the fill and set that to 0. And then we'll hit OK. So now this layer is just adding the glow. What I can do is add a layer mask to this, go to my brushes, right mouse click, make sure I have a soft round brush selected. I'm going to take the hardness down to 0 and take the size up to probably around 125. And then we'll just start painting this out from the bottom. Maybe something like that. So there you go. You can see we now have a nice glow wrapping around him. It gives him a little more volume and also makes it a little more real. We can also just adjust the opacity on this whole layer if we want to make it a little bit less strong or a little bit stronger. We would just take this layer and make a copy of it. But I think it's strong enough. We'll just set the opacity to 90. All right, the next thing I want to do is add some birds to the sky. So let's go all the way up here. We already have this blank layer, so we'll use this. Actually, this is not a blank layer. This is the foot shadow. So I'm going to call this foot shadow. And then we can take all this, put it in a group, and call this model. And to group it, just do Command G. All right, then I'm going to deselect my layers. And to do that, I'm just clicking outside of any selected layer. You can also go up to Layer, and somewhere here you have the option of deselecting layers. Right here, deselect layers. Okay, then we're going to add a new layer, and we'll call this birds. The one thing you have to look out for is if you have a group selected and create a new layer, sometimes it'll put that layer inside the group. So that's why I prefer to just deselect and then create the new layer after. Okay, so now we're going to go back to our brush tool, right mouse click, and go back to our sample brushes. I'm going to select this Nucly Flock 56 brush, make it a little bit smaller until I can see my birds. I want to make them so that they're proportionally sized to how big he is. So that would be something like this. And then I'm just going to select white as my starting color. And I'm going to put the birds right about there. And then here, I want to add maybe just a touch of color to the birds. So what I'm going to do is go to my image, adjustments, hue saturation, and just start dragging this a little bit darker, see what kind of result I get. So you can see we're getting this kind of odd coloration there. So I don't want to go that far. So it would make sense for the birds in front of the light to be perceived as a little darker, but it doesn't look great for these other ones. So what I'll probably do here is I'm going to cancel out of this, add another layer, and we'll just call this darken. And I'm going to clip this layer to the birds. And what that means is whatever I add to this layer, it'll only show up based on the transparency of the layer below. So if I paint with a broad paintbrush, it'll only show up on the birds. And to clip a layer, what you're going to do is hold down Option and click between them. So now whatever I put on this layer will only affect this layer below it. So I'm going to go to my brush tool, right mouse click, select a soft round brush. I'm going to take my flow down to about 10%, select this kind of pinkish color, and just in these birds here, make them a little bit darker. So something like that. And then the next thing I want to do is add a moon to our sky. So I'm going to add one more layer here. We'll call this moon. I'm going to go back to my brush tool, right mouse click, and under my sample brushes, we're going to select this moon brush. And for the moon brush, I'm going to option and just select the brightest color of the sky down here. And then click once. Now, because I set my flow to 10, it's not really showing up. I'm going to Command Z, set this to 100, and then click again. Okay, so we now have our moon in place. I'm going to Command T for transform, just rotate that a little bit. I kind of want this highlight to be pointing to this thing right there. It'll help just draw our attention into it. Okay, and then finally, I want to add some Saturn rings to this. I'm going to show you a really cool trick you can do, and that is using a kind of a hidden feature inside gradients. So first, let's go ahead and just make a new layer. We're going to call this Saturn rings. And in order to do this properly, I need to know where the center of my image is. So I'm going to go to View, Guides, New Guide Layout, and here I want to make 2 columns and 2 rows, and I want to have no gutter. And what that'll do is it'll just give me a center point for my image. Next, I'm going to go to my elliptical marquee, and from the center point of my image, I'm going to hold down Option and Shift and get a nice perfect circle. Then I'm going to go to my gradient tool. I'm going to change this to the classic gradient. I want to select the radial gradient, and then I'm going to click into the gradient editor. And here, what we're going to do is we're going to change the type from solid to noise. And a noise gradient just basically creates some procedural noise that you can then assign colors to or randomize. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my color model to HSB. And the reason for that is with HSB, I have the saturation as its own slider. So I can take my saturation and slide it all the way to 0. And now my gradient is going to be just black and white colors. Next, I'm going to click on this randomize. And what I'm looking for here is if this were just a cross cut of our Saturn rings, what would be like a nice cross cut? So something like this looks pretty good. We're just going to go through a few more. I want to get something with relatively good gradients throughout. So this looks really good. Let's hit OK. Next, I'm going to go from the center here and just go out toward the edge. So there you can see kind of the beginning of our Saturn rings. Next, I'm going to go to my selection tool here. And in the taskbar, you'll notice that there's this transform here. I'm going to select that. And what this is doing is it's only transforming the selection, not my pixels. So here I'm basically going to holding down Option so that it scales from the center point. I'm just scaling this down so that I have about how thick I want my rings to be. I'll hit the check mark and then hit delete. And then we'll drop our selection with Command D and then go back onto our move tool, and then I'm going to do Command T for transform. Now I'm just going to transform this to look like a ring around this planet. So the first thing we'll do is just hold Shift and make these more like this. So I want to give them a little bit of perspective. So we'll do something like this. And I'm just holding down Command, Option, and Shift as I do this. So we get a little bit of perspective there. We'll do something like this. I'm mostly just doing this by eyeball, meaning what I think looks good. And I want to have the rings coming in front and then behind. So Think of these rings as being in front of the planet, and then this one back here as being behind the planet. So I think something like that looks pretty good. Could even make it just a bit smaller. And then I'll hit the check mark there. And then what I'm going to do here is add a mask first. And then we're going to go to our elliptical tool, our elliptical marquee, just try to center up, make a circular selection of the moon. Now, I didn't line it up perfectly. Here's a nice trick. Right now I'm holding down Option and Shift to get a perfect circle. But how do I move this selection to get it around my moon? The trick here is just while you're holding the other two keys, meaning Option and Shift, click on the space bar, and with the space bar you can move, with the space bar you can move your selection without dropping it. So hold the space bar, line it up to the center. I can drop the space bar and then continue adjusting the size. So there you go. I have it now nicely lined up with my mask selected. I'm going to go to my brush tool, change this to one of the general brushes, make it a bit smaller, and then with black, paint out the bottom part of those rings. And then we'll do Command D to drop our selection. Now, obviously, this is way too prominent in this scene. So what we're going to do is we're going to color it with a gradient map. Now, in order to color with a gradient map, we need a gradient. But before I even go and add the gradient map down here, I want to first set the colors of the gradient map. And the gradient map is going to be determined by your foreground and background color. So what we'll do is we'll just go to our eyedropper tool and select the darkest part of the sky. And then now you'll notice that it made it gray. And that's because I have my mask selected. And a mask only has black and white. So let's go ahead and select any of the color layers as opposed to the mask. And then because the sample here is on all layers, we'll sample whatever color we're over. So I want to select this dark color and then switch these colors and select the lightest color of the moon here. Actually, I might even go lighter and select the lightest part of the sky. So those are my two colors. I want to make sure that the dark color is in the front and then the light color is in the back. And then I'm going to select my Saturn rings, go here and add a gradient map. And you'll notice that it's adding those two colors to this. And I want to clip this so that it's only applying to my Saturn rings. And there you can see we now have those colors. Now, if I think this is too light or too dark, I could try reversing this. But I don't think that's giving me a great result. The other thing I can do is go in here and adjust this. Or even add another color in here. Maybe something like this. All right, and then I want it to fade out a little bit in the background. So I'm going to take both of these layers, put them in a folder called Saturn Rings. And then I'm going to add a mask to this layer. And then with just a soft brush, take the flow down to maybe 20. Kind of paint with black toward the back area here and here. So something like that. And then I can take this and the moon layer and just make them a little bit smaller. And also I'm going to put them behind all of our layers except for our background so that they are not in front of the birds there. So something like that. And then on my birds layer, I want to take some of these birds and just make them kind of spread across the sky. So I'm just using my lasso tool, holding down Command, and just moving these about. so it doesn't look like this Saturn. Yeah, it's starting to look a little bit more natural. And then maybe we'll make a couple of these as well. If you hold down Option and Command while you drag, you're going to make a copy. If you just hold down Command, you'll move the pixels. So something like that. I'm going to turn off my guides, and then I'm pretty happy with that. The last thing I might do is just add a flare to it. So let's go ahead, and in my libraries, I'm going to go to my Nucly flares. I'll include the flare that I use inside the assets as well. I want to select one. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the names. There you go. And I'm going to put this on grid view. And maybe I'll take this flare 12. And I'm going to put this on screen and have this kind of right behind where he is. And then I'm going to put this behind him. So something like this. And then because this is a very sharp flare, I'm just going to add a tiny bit of blur to it. And then I'm also going to add a curve to it. So I'm going to do Command M and just take the black down a little bit so it's not adding so much red into our blacks there. Something like that. So there you have it. That completes this composite and also completes this tutorial. Hopefully through the course of it, you learned some tips, tricks, and techniques that you can use in your own projects. Now, in this course, we used one of my bird brushes as well as one of my silhouette people brushes. I do have 3 full packs of silhouette brushes that include all manner of birds, flocks, solitary people, people in action, couples, children, and so forth. They're great for these types of composites. I will include a link to those in the description of this video. Also, if you're interested in learning Photoshop, compositing, retouching, image manipulation, go ahead and check out Nucly.com. I've got professional training there as well as assets and tools that you can use in Photoshop to enhance your images and your composites. Now, if you enjoyed this tutorial, I would really appreciate if you subscribe to my channel, leave a like, leave a comment, share this video, and here are some other tutorials that you can check out. I will see you next time.